خبرگزاری صدا و سیما به نقل از منابع مطلع در منطقه اعلام کرده دستگاه اطلاعاتی ایران به انبوهی از اطلاعات و اسناد راهبردی و حساس رژیم صهیونیستی از جمله هزاران سند مربوط به طرح‌ها و تأسیسات اتمی آن رژیم دست یافته است. سازمان امنیت داخلی شینبت و پلیس رژیم صهیونیستی 17 روز پیش در بیانیه‌ای فاش کردند روی مزراحی و الموگ آتیاس هر دو 24 ساله اهل نشر در شمال سرزمین‌های اشغالی را به اتهام همکاری با ایران دستگیر کردند. بازداشت این افراد اگر مرتبط با پرونده اخیر باشد پس از خروج محموله‌های اسناد از سرزمین‌های اشغالی بوده است. این منابع اعلام کردند اگرچه عملیات دستیابی به اسناد مذکور چندی پیش انجام شده اما حجم بسیار زیاد اسناد و ضرورت انتقال امن همه محموله به داخل کشور موجب شد تا حصول اطمینان از رسیدن همه آنها به اماکن محافظت شده مورد نظر سکوت خبری اعمال شود. منابع مطلع به خبرگزاری صدا و سیما اعلام کردند فراوانی اسناد در حدی است که صرف بررسی آنها و مشاهده تصاویر و فیلم‌ها زمان قابل توجهی را مصروف خود کرده است. پیگیری خبرگزاری صدا و سیما برای کسب اطلاعات بیشتر درباره این دستاورد بزرگ اطلاعاتی همچنان ادامه دارد.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's stream. This is a recorded stream with 𝐒𝐚𝐧 from the Islamic Republic of Iran. Today is the 9th of June 2025, and we recorded this few hours ago, and now we're broadcasting it to you. As you may know, guys, the war in West Asia and in different places around the world is not only a military hot war, but also intelligence warfare. And we've seen in the past year and a half and two, the capabilities of Iran and Israel in the region in waging intelligence warfare, technological warfare, psychological operations, and different layers of warfare, basically. But this week, we received reports from the Islamic Republic of Iran that the government of Iran managed somehow to take over sensitive documents and secret information, some of which are speculated that they belong to the nuclear program of the Israeli side, which they never have made it public to the world and to the region. Today we're going to discuss this. I'm very excited to have with me 𝐒𝐚𝐧. He is a brilliant geopolitical analyst from Iran. 𝐒𝐚𝐧, thank you so much for coming to the show to hear your thoughts about this. What do we know so far from the local reports in Iran about the operation itself, and what could be the nature of the documents that Iran has taken over from Israel?
So before we start this conversation, it is paramount for your viewers to understand that as of right now, as of the time of this recording, no document has been released. The data that they are going, the information that they are going to receive by listening to this conversation is going to be solely based on the statements that were made by the Ministry of the Intelligence and Security in Iran and the IRIB, which is the official state media of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So take that in mind while you're listening to these informations that you're about to hear. So in 7th of June, apologies, IRIB, the state media of Islamic Republic, broke this news that Iran has basically obtained this mountain of information, what they called massive amounts of information that has sensitive and strategic data about the Israeli regime, including thousands of documents about its nuclear program and also documents about its relation and collaboration with countries like United States and the European countries. So this story broke out Also, the name of two settlers inside Israel were mentioned, Roy Mirzahi and Almog Atias. The name of these two individuals were mentioned. They were arrested 18 days ago, by the Israeli Internal Intelligence, Shabak. And the way that the Iranian media framed it was very particular, because they said, if you have arrested these people as it relates to this news, you have to understand that the data has been already physically moved to Iran. This term physically is very important.
Yes.
Later, the Minister of the Intelligence and Security also made the same comment. So this is the first clue that we receive, that the data, the documents have been transferred into Iran physically. And since the information, the data that Iran has obtained contains videos and pictures, it would be a safe bet to say that we're probably talking about hard drives, disks, flash drives. But also, I'm listening to a lot of analysts and a lot of sources. We cannot really rule out the fact that this collection of data might also contain paper documents. And I would bet, if I was a betting man, that it will most likely do so. It contains paper documents. So that's the first thing. The second thing that we can find out by listening to the interview given by the Minister of Intelligence and Security is that the documents will be publicized soon. And I mean, when we say soon, we have to understand that, it's based on the Iranian timeline, so it probably means distant future.
Yeah.
But he made a very interesting comment. He said that the details on the operation will not be publicized, which is, again, very interesting thing to say. If you recall the Israeli approach to their operation of blowing up pagers and walkie-talkies, they actually publicized a lot of things.
Yes.
People even went on 60 Minutes and they talked about details of the operation. They bragged about it, and it was due to the fact that once you do that, because the supply chain is already compromised, there is no more any point to you denying anything or trying to hide anything. So you might as well brag about it. But the Minister of Intelligence and Security, 𝐤𝐚𝐽 𝐶hatib, stated that he's not going to do so. It would take years for Iran to finally publicize this information, which gives us a clue, and it might hint at the possibility that the network, the individuals involved in the operation, the assets that Iran has inside Israel, they're still not compromised, which is very, very important to notice. It would most likely be the case that the network is still intact. These two individuals are probably very, very low in the chain of operation. They're at the bottom of the chain of operation. Since he stated something very particular, he stated that people's access, individuals' access to data were increased. They were given increased access level.
Yes.
Which possibly hints that these individuals didn't have access to these documents and these data, but their access level was increased, and they're probably their arrest is probably meaningless, right? The third thing that I noticed was the fact that the Iranian minister used a term, tarh, which in Persian has a very wide range of meanings. It can denote plan, roadmap, literally design, sketch, blueprint, schematic. It has a wide range of meaning. Many people, when he made the comment that, it would increase the Iranian capability to strike Israel, they interpreted that as, they probably now understand different warehouses that certain strategic assets of Israel are stored. But, I listened to that conversation very, very carefully, like 50 times. And from the clues that I was able to notice here and there in his interview, I'm inclined to tilt towards the interpretation that these documents include possibly the schematics or some kind of analysis either about the not the Iron Dome, the air defense systems in general in Israel, or even possibly the schematics of the Israeli weapons themselves. That, obviously if you have the schematics and if you have the infrastructure needed, you can replicate what they did, and you possibly can manufacture the same kind of weapons. So these are the three major things that we understand. The data was physically moved to Iran. Again, hard disks, flash drives, paper documents possibly. Second thing, the network is most likely uncompromised. And the last thing that we understand, and we can sort of speculate, is that, these documents possibly include the schematics of the Israeli weapons or the information about the air defense systems in Israel.
At the beginning of this conversation with you, I mentioned that the war between Israel and the Iranian side is not exclusive to hot battles or military wars against each other, whether directly or indirectly, but also intelligence and psychological operation. And why I said psychological operation, because now that you answered this question and you said the network, which is allegedly or has allegedly leaked this information or these documents physically outside of the Israeli territories to Iran, they're not compromised. And this means that Iran has waged also psychological warfare against Israel, now that Israel has to find where is this leakage or this information is coming from. If the individuals or the network of operatives aren't or weren't compromised, then they are still inside Israel. This means Israel has to do now another level of, let's say, intelligence work to find out what is going on within the corridors of the Israeli Secret Service in this case, and especially when it comes to its nuclear program. But when you see Iran coming in public and saying, we successfully did this intelligence operation against Israel, why do they publicize it to the public? Israel usually doesn't do that. They wait until the operation is over and everything. There is the element of surprise against the enemy. But in this case, Iran has publicized it and made it public to everyone that they have taken over or their hands have reached to sensitive information. Why do you think that is?
Okay, you made a series of interesting comments that I can't help but to expand upon. You talked about the psychological warfare. I think that Iran has done actually a very poor job of using this material. Again, we are trying to analyze the situation based on the statements made by the Minister of Intelligence and Security and the Iranian state media. If what they are claiming is true, then the ratification, the consequences of this operation would be very huge. People are calling it, October 7th equivalent in the field of intelligence and reconnaissance. So it's very important to understand that this operation was massive in scale, but they didn't go in the right direction in order to publicize it. Israel has previously carried out operations, and I can say 100% that they have done a far better job of waging psychological warfare on Iran. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I think is very important for people to understand is that, when we're talking about the network and what they have been to accomplish, what they have been able to accomplish, if you go back and recall the articles published by the Israeli media, Israeli's state media, very recently there have been this surge of articles that are talking about the Iranian influence in Israel and the way that Iran has been able to penetrate the Israeli apparatus. So this is something that they themselves know. And if you listen to the tone of the articles that were published about this particular episode between Iran and Israel, they go about it in a very particular way. So again, like if you follow the Israeli media, you know that it will take some time that the gag order would be issued that, okay, you can't talk about certain things. We saw that with regards to the Yemeni missiles, with regards to drones that were launched by Hezbollah. We have seen this, but this time, very interestingly, it seems that they are prepared. Shabak was prepared that Iran is going to do this. And again, they have already arrested 2 individuals in Israel. But now, I want to wrap this part up and get to the core of your question. What was the incentive in Iran to publicize this information? There are a series of, motivations that we can discuss. One of the major ones would be for Iran to tilt the negotiating table to its favor in the talks with United States. Again, if your audience recall, at the first round of talks, we are currently have carried out the 5th round of talks, and we are moving towards the 6th round. In the first round of talks, Iran called for a nuclear-free Middle East. And if these documents, again, we're just speculating, if these documents would be able to dismantle this Israeli policy of nuclear ambiguity, then Iran can, again, highlight this demand of nuclear-free Middle East, or even possibly, that's the second possibility, it can use it as an excuse in order to develop nuclear weapon, because throughout the history, many of the countries that developed nuclear weapon did so with the justification that they are being threatened by a nuclear state. Like Pakistan said that we are threatened by India. Soviet Union, it did so because it said that it wants to balance the power with United States. So that's the second possibility. They want to actually develop nuclear weapon. I would say that considering the kind of dialogues that are being held inside Iran, this second possibility is less likely than the first one. But also it can be to sort of dismantle this myth by the Israeli regime that Iran has been weakened and Iran can't do anything. Since the publicizing of this news, the morale has increased inside Iran and within the axis of resistance in general. So in certain aspects, it was the very same thing that you mentioned, psychological warfare and balancing the sort of mental fortitude of the people who subscribe to this ideology of resistance within the region.
Yeah. But when you publicize such an information to the public, does this indicate that we are getting closer or further from an Israeli attack on Iran? It seems for me that the Iranian side, I might be wrong, that they have publicized it to to curb a possible Israeli aggression against Iran, something that the Americans say we don't want a military attack against Iran. We are negotiating with them, but Netanyahu claims that he has a different approach against Iran, and if they wage an attack against Iran, this will automatically drag the United States into conflict that they probably do not want. So do you see this as an Iranian attempt to curb or avoid an Israeli attack against them? Because after October 7, Iran has shown a restraint in the region, and it's quite clear that they are not interested in an open, all-out war in the region that could be destructive for everyone. So this could be just probably, I'm saying, that the Iranians are throwing this carrot into the discussion so that they curb or avoid an escalation in the region, something that they send a signal to the Israelis. We have taken over sensitive information about your sensitive military installations, including the nuclear program, and this could be the consequence of it, because now the Israeli side has to completely reshuffle its intelligence, let's say, secret intelligence operations or their installations and facilities inside Israel in order to keep Iran again in the darkness or in the dark spot, something that is not the case at the current moment.
Well, you're not wrong in believing so, and that's actually a very plausible explanation about the current episode of, conflict between Iran and Israel. But we have to understand something. Power projection has a lot to do with deterrence. I mean, deterrence has a lot to do with power projection. Mm-hmm. If you have sophisticated weapons, but you don't showcase them, well, how is that supposed to deter your enemy mm-hmm. from ever attacking you? Political decisions also have a lot to contribute to, creating a deterrence. Since, during these past few months, we Iranians have been doing a lot of self-reflection about how did we end up in this situation. Since the election of President Pezeshkian, the attacks by Israel on the axis of resistance has increased. And then when that's one data, and then you go and try to analyze the situation based on the capabilities of each of these two countries. I mean, Israel is a regime, but anyway. You try to analyze the situation, and you have a very hard time to understand how the situation turned out this way. And it's mostly due to bad political decision making. You talked about restraint that Iran has shown. Well, I think it is safe to say that it was probably the wrong thing to do. We are now, again, like the articles that are being published by different analysts, they have current themes. One is that the attacks since the assassination of Sayyid Ebrahim Raisi, the previous president of the Islamic Republic.
You said assassination, right? I'm hearing you correctly.
I said assassination?
That's
no. I didn't mean to say that.
Maybe I misheard you. I just I'm used to that because I don't believe personally that he died in a helicopter accident.
Look, what I try to do, maybe this was my subconscious doing something, but what I tend to do when actively analyzing things is that if I don't have hard proof evidence on something, I would refrain from doing so. When you put the circumstantial evidences together, it seems a lot like it has been an assassination. But since I don't have concrete evidence, I would usually refrain from calling it assassination. I would call it, helicopter crash. Mm-hmm. But anyway, people are going to have their opinions on that matter either way. But yeah, there are recurrent themes in these analyses. The helicopter crash is being brought up a lot. And then people also talk about the wasted potential, the missiles that Hezbollah had, but they were never launched on Israel, the fact that we only saw Syria launching an attack on Israel after the collapse of the Assad government, right? Which is like, you can say a lot of things about that and the interpretations that people have. Some people have jumped into the bandwagon, oh, Syria has joined the resistance and everything. So you can criticize all that, but it's very interesting that that didn't happen under the rule of Mr. Assad, and again, you can talk about different things, and I'm sure that we will get to mention some of those things later on in our conversation. But yeah, so bad decision making has been a contributing factor to the situation and the circumstance that we have found ourselves in. While I do personally believe that if the statements, again, this is a very big if the statements made by the Minister of the Intelligence and Security in Iran are correct, then this is an earthquake. This is an intelligence earthquake, again, equivalent of what happened on October 7th. And it would be a very huge thing. But it is also questionable, and you can argue how much it would contribute to creating deterrence and preventing Israel from attacking Iran, because now we know that when we were waiting for Operation True Promise 2, certain individuals like the Iranian president, like the former vice president of Iranian strategic affairs, Mohammad Javad Zarif, they subscribe to the notion that United States and the Western countries are seeking a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel, right?
Yes.
They truly believe that that would happen, right? And the inaction, the period of inaction, that the axis of resistance wasn't really doing anything, or maybe it would be better for me to phrase it as Iran not doing anything. You had the pager attacks, the walkie-talkie attacks, the assassination of Fuad Shogh, the assassination of this PMF commander by United States, the assassination of the military, I would phrase it as entire level of military commanders of Hezbollah, including Haj Abdul Qadir, the commander of Rezwan unit, and finally the assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. Yes. That period of inaction emboldened Israel to basically lash out on every player in the region like a rabid dog, right? And people are going to criticize me for speaking this way. They are going to say that I'm partisan and that I'm, undermining the Iranian interest. But we have to acknowledge the facts if we want to prevent the same things happening. Again, this is a very major thing if the statements are true. But I would think that, in a few weeks, people will probably forget about it. If it doesn't translate itself to an actual operation, if it doesn't translate itself to a new power dynamics inside the region. So again, we have to be very cautious about how we talk about the consequence of this operation.
Ihsan, I would just say something personal to you, and this is not like I'm trying to make a compliment to you, but I invited you to this show because I read for you, I read what you write, and you're one of the few, let's say, geopolitical analysts from Iran who are ready to criticize some of the actions and the policies of the government. And this is very important to do self-reflection and evaluation of what the Iranian government has done after the helicopter crash that happened, or let's say the mysterious helicopter crash that happened, and the series of decisions made by the politicians in Iran. And I shared your position much more than other people. And I came to the conclusion that it is very, very important to do this critique, because if you don't do critique, then it means everything is all right, and everything is not all right in the region, right? And that's why we have to say when we miss, or some governments miss, and some governments, for example, make miscalculations or wrong decisions, because that is in the interest of the nation itself and the people, because otherwise you're saying this government is cannot make any mistakes and everything is all right. Now, in this
Can I
case,
make a quick comment?
yes, please.
Can I make it quick? So if people go back and watch my interviews with different outlets, at the time of this period of time that we were waiting for Operation True Promise 2, I went on different shows and stated that things are probably moving as they are planned, and I was kind of denying the fact that it is probably a political decision that we are not witnessing Operation True Promise 2. And one of the reasons that I did so was due to the fact that I don't really support the actions of the Iranian government. And since I supported another candidate during the election, people were telling me that, oh, you're bipartisan, you're doing this out of revenge or something like this. And I allowed myself to be gaslit by other people. This is very important. I would rather prefer to come on your show and apologize for my own mistake in my own analysis than to find myself in this humiliating situation that I now have to talk about. And this is an excuse. There is no excuse for me to say that I was wrong because I was gaslit and I was leaning more towards the fact that it is a political decision. But that's what I'm trying to basically tell your audience, that do not be threatened by some of the big names that you hear online, that, oh, certain individuals are thinking that certain things are happening in this region. You are witnessing the things unfolding in this region. How can you think that this is okay? Again, like, this is not because we do not support the axis of resistance. I myself, I know you too, we support the axis of resistance. But, this gaslighting, this, constant denial of the failures that either Iran or other countries in the axis of resistance have, if this continues, it would be very dangerous.
It's
because
destructive. It's self-destructive.
Yeah, apart from that, the audience will gradually, they might believe you now, they might believe you the next time, but they will gradually lose any respect that they have for you and say that this
100%.
person is not telling the truth, is the mouthpiece for his own country. And I would really advise against people doing so.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on this. Last point, 𝐬𝐚𝐧. By the way, guys, his Twitter X account is in the description below, and he's publishing his own analysis and opinions about what is going on in the region, and specifically with particular focus on Iran. We have around 4 minutes. 𝐬𝐚𝐧, I just want to ask you about Iran's nuclear ambitions in the region. We know that there are talks now with the United States. And do you see that there could be a middle ground in this? The US says no enrichment. Iran says we're not going to compromise over this. Do you see that the middle ground could be mutual enrichment in the region, for example, between Iran and Saudi Arabia with the supervision of the United States?
No, unfortunately, no. Look, when you analyze the situation, when you're an expert and understand how the sanctions work, and you understand that there have been different legislations that were passed against Iran, 𝐒𝐚𝐧, 𝐒𝐚𝐽𝐶, 𝐶𝐶, and you understand that United States president doesn't actually have the mandate to remove the sanctions from Iran. And what's the point of Iran negotiating with United States? It's economic relief, right? When you look at this situation from the technical standpoint, and then on the other side, you understand that Iran has a vested interest in enriching uranium because, roughly 1 million Iranians depend on 20% enriched uranium that is used in Tehran research reactor to produce the radiopharmaceutical drugs that the cancer patients need for their treatment. When you understand that that's basic necessity for the Iranians, a lot of Iranians are going to die if that enrichment isn't done. And when you are educated about the precedents that we have witnessed, like the fact that in 1970s, I think 1974 to be more precise, Iran purchased 10% of the stocks of this European company called European Gas Diffusion Consortium, and gave a $1.2 billion loan to France. And in return, it asked for the right to receive enriched uranium for its nuclear program. But later on in 1980s, I think 1982, the French president, François Mitterrand, he actually made a statement that, oh, we're not going to honor our deal with Iran and we're not going to provide them with enriched uranium that they desperately need, and we're not going to give them the loan that they paid us. We're not going to return that money. If you remember the 2009 fuel swap agreement between Iran, Brazil, and Turkey, it was a deal that was actually backed by United States. The day that the foreign ministers of Turkey and Brazil came to Iran,
Yes.
Each of them had a letter with them with different rhetorics and different wording, but it was essentially a letter from Obama to them,
Yes.
to their country, that they should use their friendly relations with Iran and then negotiate this fuel swap agreement. So it was a US
Yes.
idea, and basically Iran agreed to that. But right the day that Iran actually signed that agreement with both Brazil and Turkey, the next day United States went behind Iran, Brazil, and Turkey's back and passed the resolution 1929 in United Nations Security Council against what was agreed upon, right? And Obama, this Nobel Prize winning president of United States that had a drone program with 90% civilian casualty rate, he actually, surprise, surprise, denied Iranians the materials that they needed in order to produce the pharmaceutical drugs needed for the treatment of their cancer patients. So these two precedents, the precedent with Eurodif and the French government, and the fuel swap agreement that Iran had with Brazil and Turkey, which was a US-backed idea, these two precedents actually tell you very clearly that United States can't be trusted. And now, I think at that time, there were only like 500,000 Iranians who relied on those pharmaceutical drugs for their treatment. Now, the demand for that has doubled.
Yeah.
So 1 million Iranians are now relying on those, medicines. And if Iranian government wants to make a decision based on concrete facts and historical precedents, I'm not even being ideological here. I am a very ideological person. I do not deny that. But even if you're a person that argues that, we should be more pragmatic, then based on the precedents, you should be very, very aware of the fact that in all likelihood, there will be no deal, but like almost everything else that we discussed on this conversation, political decision-making has a lot to do with, certain political parties' interest in the election, in being reelected, and things of that nature. And unfortunately, I cannot guarantee that, Iran would not make extensive capitulation, excessive capitulation to United States demands. But based on the statements, I can say this, based on the statements that we are hearing from Ministry of Foreign Affairs, then we can say that, it is safe to say that we probably won't see any deal between Iran and United States unless it would be an interim deal, which would then enable United States president to back off from its claim that it's going to be either a deal or an outright all-out war between Iran and United States. And for Iran to not be forced to defend its territories, because, I mean, who wants to really fight in a war against United States, right?
Yeah.
So interim deal is the only thing that I can see based on the statements that would be plausible.
Yes, I totally agree with you on this, that the US still enjoys a very sophisticated and very brutal, excessive force, basically. And what happened after October 7 is the fact that they have shown to the world that they are ready to go to the end, which means they're ready to eliminate and annihilate an entire population for the sake of achieving a geostrategic and economic goal, basically in West Asia. And the amount of civilian casualties in the Gaza Strip should alarm everyone, that when the empire feels like they have been pushed to the corner, they are acting in a very, very brutal manner, including like striking deals with Al-Qaeda in Syria, right? For the sake of domination over the region. So we're at a point where nothing shocks me, basically, and nothing will surprise me in the region. But there is one country which I'm blocked by its president, Ilham Aliyev, the Azerbaijani president. I didn't interact with him at all. I swear to God, I didn't interact with him. I didn't post anything. I didn't comment on his post. But when the war erupted with Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh, he was still not, let's say, blocking me. But then one of the Azeri state media outlets, they have brought my name as one of the main sources of misinformation and disinformation about that war. So apparently somebody blocked me, one of his social media teams.
What an honor.
Yeah, exactly. And I've been reading some WikiLeaks documents about Azerbaijan, and it looks to me that it's an advanced satellite country for Israel, especially for their intelligence operations, to the extent that Mossad, one of the Mossad operatives, say that they feel home in Azerbaijan. Like there are no restrictions for them. They move around easily, more than they move around easily in Israel itself. I know that Iran has to be worried of, let's say, Azerbaijan, but do you think that Iran is doing enough with Azerbaijan when it comes to the Israeli intelligence operations? Because I'm sure that they're using this territory to destabilize the domestic affairs inside Iran.
If you have spent, a decent amount of time following the Israeli developments, you would understand how their mode of operation is. And what they tend to do is that they go to a country first under the guise of private business, under the guise of these so-called agricultural programs, these cultural programs, and then you will see them expanding their presence and doing all sorts of things. Their playbook is not alien and not unknown to the people who actually follow, their mode of operation. More than 100 countries, 100 companies, more than 100 companies are now operating inside Azerbaijan. Yes. We're talking about Israeli firms. They're operating in Azerbaijani territories. The bilateral trade between Azerbaijan and Israel in the first 7 months of 2024 was something like $1.15 billion.
Yes.
Right. and it increased like 40%. The state-owned gas company of Azerbaijan owns 10% of Tamar field that the occupation forces in Israel are controlling, and Azerbaijan is supplying 40% of the oil that the Israelis need. 70% of the weapons, roughly 70%. It's a little bit less than that, but a little bit less than 70% of the arms that Azerbaijan was purchasing in certain years were supplied to them by Israel. But you do actually know these things better than me. You're Syrian Armenian, which means that you were both following the events of Artsakh and also the events of Syria, which Turkey had a major role in, right? So you actually know these things better than I do, and I actually encourage that your audience would go through the list of your videos and watch them for more information. Instead of responding to your question, I would actually ask another question and then answer that. Are there measures that Iran taking that would basically address the concerns that many analysts have with regards to Azerbaijan? The answer is no. And unfortunately, I can say that the exact opposite is happening. There seems to be not even awareness about the potential threats that Azerbaijan poses to Iran, based on this framework of operation that it has with Israel. I'll give you an example. So during the presidency of Marty Raisi, Iran had an agreement with Russia to import gas, basically. Iran was supposed to be turned into this gas hub, and during the first stage, Iran plans to import 55 billion cubic meter of gas from Russia. Just to give you a frame of reference as to how much of a big deal this is, Iran is the third largest producer of gas in the world.
Yes.
We produce something like 250 billion cubic meters of gas. 55 billion cubic means that it's 20% of the third largest producers of gas in the world is going to be imported to Iran. During the time of Shahid Raisi's administration, it was, if you listen to the Minister of Oil and Gas, he said that Russia owns the technology to make a pipeline that goes on the floor, the ocean floor, or the sea floor, right? Nord Stream 2 and Nord Stream 1. Hello. But now the statement has come from the Iranian Minister of Oil, Minister of Oil and Gas, that they are going to use Azerbaijan as the route for their pipeline. Does this make any sense for Iran to be dependent on any country? No. Any country. We're not even talking about a country that has excessive relations with Israel, but any country. Does this make sense to import this much gas from any country? What really terrifies me that the actual number, in the second stage, they are going to increase the amount of imported gas to 110 billion cubic meter, which is roughly around 47% of the entire gas that Iran produces. And it basically goes to empower Azerbaijan and Turkey. Yeah. Hello, didn't you learn anything from what happened in Syria? A senior politician in Iran said that they didn't think that Turkey would, betray them, which is such a funny thing to say. If you're a politician, to say that you didn't think that something would go wrong, and then still you would see this. I'll give you another example. very recently there was a summit between the foreign ministers of the BRICS countries. The Iranian foreign minister wasn't there. Do you like to take a guess where he was? He was in Azerbaijan. I mean, who cares about the opportunity to have a meeting and dialogue with Sergei Lavrov, with Wang Yi, the foreign ministers of Russia and China? No, we're not really talking about anything serious. Just two of the most powerful countries in the world, two superpowers. He was in Azerbaijan. Why? Why? I'll give you another example. In the same proximity of time that Iran was holding a military exercise with Azerbaijan, during that time frame, either the Israeli war minister or the Azerbaijani defense minister, they traveled to the other one's country and they held a dialogue, a meeting, and the rhetoric that they used was completely strange. I mean, when you put it alongside these events, and you have to ask yourself, does this have anything to do with the fact that the Iranian president is an Azeri, and then after the martyrdom of the previous one, during this new administration, they suddenly decide that the pipeline would go through Azerbaijan? You can make all the arguments about you being against the Zangezur corridor. And I think that the military commanders and the intelligence apparatus inside Iran, the different analysts that write articles, they do truly want to prevent that from happening. But then at certain times, you have to look at reality and say, is this wishful thinking? Are we just lying to ourselves? How much are they being able to do? Since, when we talk about security deals, you have to also talk about the economic attachments to those projects. Example of that would be Syria, despite the initial victory of the Axis of Resistance, because that project wasn't supported by economic relief towards Syria. We saw that in the second iteration of the dirty war against Syrian government collapsed. So again, this is a very dangerous and perilous situation. I advise people to be very cautious, and if they have any influence in advising the political decision makers, that they should talk very differently about the things that are happening.
I would just mention two things before we wrap up this brilliant conversation with you, Ihsan. The first one is, you mentioned the Israeli investments inside Azerbaijan, and I would like to encourage our viewers to go to any search engine and type Israeli smart villages Azerbaijan and check where are they building quote-unquote smart villages on the borders with Iran. And the helicopter crash of Raisi happened between 200 to 300 kilometers away from one of these Israeli-made smart villages, which they say is for agricultural purposes, which I don't believe that at all, that it is only for agricultural purposes. This could be a major technological hub for Israel to wage technological cyber attacks against Iran just on the borders. It's like you cross with your feet and you go into Iran, and this is where they are building this. And the second thing you mentioned, the allies of Syria. I have to say first, the number one actor who should be blamed for the collapse of Syria is Syria and the Syrians themselves. So let's put that aside. However, on the economic side, it's crazy. I want to mention a few facts to you. China struck a strategic partnership with Syria, but refused to invest in Syria until a political compromise is reached, which means Syria had to wait for a compromise with the United States and Israel before the Chinese investors would come to Syria. So they didn't invest, they didn't bring a relief to the Syrian economy. And China is capable of doing that. Secondly, the Russians, forget about it. They don't have any economic and financial means to invest in a way that they can uplift the economy. They didn't show any interest about that. They took over the earth minerals. They invested in the earth minerals of Syria. They took a commission of it, but in exchange, they are giving you weapons. So they cannot really give you much of economic support. Iran, and this is an information I mentioned, Iran was the major oil and gas supplier to Syria during the crisis because Syria has lost access to its oil fields, right? But there was one incident which is mind-boggling. The Iranian government stopped sending fuel for 3 months to Syria because Assad rejected to meet with Erdogan. And this is an information I'm 100% sure of. And the source, like there are things that I really can't say in public because people think that I'm having special relationship or something with people. But one day when I'm in a safer place, I will definitely tell them my source. But I'm sure 100% that there was even economic pressure on Syria and economic pressure from Iran and diplomatic pressure from Russia to force Assad and go and shake hands with Erdogan. They wanted him to normalize ties with him.
Can I add some, facts to that? Look, I think that it is very important for people to understand that there are political frictions between different political parties inside Iran as well. Yeah. Since you mentioned that, and we're already opening this can of worms, one day I might write an extensive article on this one, but for now, just very quick, basically piece of information that might sound interesting to your audience. There's a book by the former foreign minister of Iran, Mr. Hossein Amir-Abdollahian. It's called The Dawn at Damascus, The Dawn of Damascus, something like that. Subh Sham, which basically, I mean, in it says, I'm not going to name any names, but people can go and read that book. That General Soleimani was very angry when the Astana talk happened and when Astana agreement was made. He wanted to finish the job. Yeah. But people can go and read what happened, what individuals actually talked with. I cannot verify the statements that the statement that you made.
Is there English copy for this book? Because I would love to read that.
No, I think that this is only in Persian. But basically, because I know that there has been a lot of fuel shortages inside Iran. For people who don't know, there is a very harsh demand on the power grid inside Iran. We have experienced, a lot of blackouts lately, right? So I cannot verify, whether or not this was merely due to the fact that Iran needed those fuel in order to, for its own purpose, for its own use. But I can tell you one thing, as a matter of fact, with complete certainty, that certain individuals, they enforced the Astana agreement on the military apparatus in Iran. And that's why when I was talking to you earlier, sometimes you make a general statement, but you don't really further, highlight what you mean. When I said that we lost due to bad political decision makings, this was one of the facts that I was referring to, that, that deal was made, a safe haven was established in northern Syria, and later on we saw what happened. And I would just add this final point to these remarks, to this commentary, that, United States was talking about it's not enough, and there needs to be deal made about the Iranian regional influence, which became known as the regional 𝐤𝐶POA, and the Iranian missile program, which became known as missile missile-oriented JCPOA. This regional JCPOA, there is this very famous individual whom I'm not going to mention his name. He actually said that French president called me. There's a hint there. French president called me and said that I talked to United States and have told them that Iran is never going to make the compromise on the missile program. They are not going to. Let's talk about the regional, matters. And then after that, he said that he made another call and said, I already have convinced them that the regional affairs of Iran can't be negotiated. Let's just focus our attention on Syria. And what happened? The Astana agreement was signed.
Yes.
So again, the reason that I'm doing this, people have to understand this. I'm not actually trying to weaken the axis of resistance. I'm saying that if you listen to what I'm saying, I'm basically saying that if there is ever a war to fight, then things will be very different than what we are seeing today. Don't let anyone to tell you that just because we have made a series of bad political decisions due to the political pressure that was exerted on the military apparatus, on the intelligence apparatus, that it is the extent of the Iranian might facing against United States and Israel. Things will be very different once an all-out war breaks out between Iran and its adversaries.
Ihsan, what a brilliant conversation with you. I want to end up here with this conclusion, which is brilliant. And I owe a lot of respect to the Iranian nation and Iranian civilization. And we have had a brotherly relationship for a very long time, also the Armenians and the Iranians. And I truly believe that in the Caucasus, the Armenians have one friend, and that is Iran. But we have a prime minister like Pashinyan who is trying to do everything in his capacity to destroy this relationship or try to minimize it on the expense of other nations. So I hope in 2026, after the parliamentary elections in Armenia, there would be a different government and a better policy with Iran, because this is detrimental for both sides, actually, in an area that is also surrounded by hostile countries, one of which is Azerbaijan, and the other one is, of course, Turkey. Guys, Ihsan's X or Twitter account is in the description below. Thank you very much for tuning in, and thank you so much, Ihsan, for coming to the show. I wish you peace be upon you, upon your families. And for those who are watching this from all around the world, on YouTube, on Rumble, or in Ganjin On, I appreciate you all. If you like this content, the simple thing to do is thumbs up, like this video, subscribe to this YouTube channel. If you like to do more and support independent journalism, there are different means in the description below. And I will see you tomorrow on Tuesday at the same time. Peace be upon you, upon your families.